Habs management might be in a bit of trouble this offseason. It's a make or break year for a lot of young Montreal Canadiens come next season, and we're going to be talking about which guys should stay with the Habs, which ones should go, and which ones might get sent down, all in this edition of Habs Digest. Hello, bonjour, ahoy, and welcome to today's edition of Habs Digest. I'm your host, Josh Gosse, alongside my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We're back together again, and a bit of a different setting, both of us not in our usual location where we record. But a quick reminder before we start, help us get to 5,000 subs. I reminded you in the last video, and we got like almost 100 subscribers in the last video alone, so clearly there's a lot of you not hitting that button yet, so do it now. It'd really help us out, and we're just going to get right into this video. These young Habs need to step up. I mean, that's basically it, Jesse. As Marco D'Amico wrote a great article today saying the Habs will be undergoing another youth movement next season. The Habs are adding a significant amount of prospects to their cupboards over the last year. The pressure is going to be felt throughout the organization. We've seen a few intriguing prospects this season rise to the occasion and show that they can handle themselves in the NHL, but there are others who are teetering on the edge. And before we get into the first guy I want to talk about in this video, I'm just going to pop up the depth chart. And Jesse, when you see this, when you see such a crowded depth chart, of course it's awesome for Montreal, but you gotta think, management might have to cut this down at least at the NHL level.
And that's what's so great about it, is we've put ourselves in such a great bargaining position by just having so many young prospects. Like as we look right now, like the cupboards are just filled up, but we have to feel like this is gonna look very different come next year as we're gonna kind of bundle up some of those younger players to get a little bit more experience and a little bit more skill that we want to kind of find a little bit more balance on this roster.
Yeah, for sure. And for those of you, don't go back and pause on the depth chart. We'll be flashing it throughout the video as we discuss the prospects we want to discuss. But like you said, Jesse, it's a good problem to have, but at the same time, it makes for some very, very difficult decisions and some troubling ones maybe for Habs management. So without further ado, let's get into the first player I want to discuss here, and that is Cayden Primeau. And if you guys weren't aware, next season, Cayden Primeau is not going to be waiver exempt anymore, meaning Montreal can't just call him up and send him down willy-nilly like they have the last few years. If they send him down next year, he will have to pass through waivers, and another team might want to go claim him. And while, yes, he had a great playoffs and a great run with Laval leading up to the playoffs, he really hasn't proven it at the NHL level yet, Jesse. And with Allen seemingly still around and Montembeault making a case for the number one goalie next year, do you see Primeau making this roster? I mean, to me, he's going to really, really have to prove himself in training camp and preseason to keep his NHL career with the Habs going.
Unfortunately, I don't see Cayden Primeau sticking around with the Montreal Canadiens for too much longer. Just due to the fact of Samuel Montembeault obviously taking that number one position this year, and just his age, where Sam, he's not a young goalie, but he's not that vet either, right? Mm-hmm. Which many teams like to have on their team. So I feel due to his play, obviously he's a lock. Now the question is, who's going to be behind him? And I feel like Kent Hughes and Martin St. Louis would much rather opt for the experience of Jake Allen in comparison to Cayden Primeau. Again, just due to the age of Samuel Montembeault, just to have a little bit of that balance. And just noting again that we're a young team. So sometimes having that veteran sort of presence, especially between the pipes, would be huge for this team when Jake Allen is called upon. Now, that being said, it is interesting. You have to feel like it's Jake Allen's position to lose. He's obviously solidified himself much more as an NHLer than Cayden Primeau has. And while we've seen that Cayden Primeau's career has been a roller coaster in many ways, he's also shown flashes of brilliance when he needs it the most. Showing up very good, recently in the playoffs as well for the Laval Rockets. So you'll really need to do something amazing this year with them now being wager eligible for this next year.
Yeah, it's got to be a stressful time if you're him, right? A guy that Habs fans, even though he was a 7th round pick, you had high hopes for Cayden Primeau, right? You have another goalie with the initial CP coming up through the system, and you can't help but hope that he ends up being a superstar. But unfortunately, he hasn't put it together. As I'll just flash his stats one more time. 852, 868, 849 save percentages in his last 3 seasons. Of course, in limited sample size in the NHL, but even in the AHL, barely over a 900 save percentage. While, yes, he did have a good run, unless he really makes that jump, you're right, Jesse, I don't see him with Montreal either, but that's kind of the point of this video. We got to highlight guys who need to step up or they might be done. But let's get into some of the defensemen. Right, and I'll flash the depth chart up again before we get into the 2 guys I want to talk about the most. So if we look at the defense, at the NHL level, you have 9 defensemen. And some of the guys that you might look at there and say, well, maybe they won't make it next year. Joel Edmundson, of course, his name's been tossed around a ton in trade rumors. Chris Weidman really didn't play very well last year, but we have him under contract, and he really seems like a good team chemistry guy. But some guys that might stick out there, someone like Justin Barron, who started the year in the AHL, and Arber Xhekaj, as unfortunate as it is to say. And Jesse, as I transition here to, Arber Xhekaj, do you think he's done enough at the NHL level to solidify himself as, like an NHL level defenseman, be in those top 3 pairings of D-men? Because there's a lot of guys ahead of him, and, I'm starting to wonder if the upside for Xhekaj is enough to vault him over someone like, say, Jordan Harris.
I think he will be a part of this team, just because he brings things that are important to this team that really no one else on this team offers, in terms of just his physicality, being able to answer the bell when it comes up. But my main reason, Josh, for feeling like Arber Xhekaj, our young defenseman, will make this team next year, besides having a great shot and showing that, he can serve effectively on that second power play as well, is really that I feel like Joel Edmundson, as well as Chris Weidman, won't be a part of this team moving forward, even though Chris Weidman is a great locker room guy, the one coming up even with the nickname for Xhekaj, as well as many others. I feel like our team would be best served on moving on from the likes of such players. Joel Edmundson, it's going to be tough to part ways, but we saw a lot of interest with him at the trade deadline. I do believe a deal will get done this summer, even though we do want still a little bit more experience on that defensive end. I feel like we're going to make room, because these young players have shown that they deserve that ice time, and we'll get that veteran presence from Savard, from others as well, and that should be sufficient.
Yeah, that's a decent point, and I wanted to highlight Barron as well. So you're basically saying that the Habs will run with 7 D-men, but with Xhekaj and Barron being those guys who still make the team, with Kovacevic, Harris, and those other guys we saw. And of course, Justin Barron had a great season in Laval this year: 7 goals, 9 assists in 25 games, even 15 points in 39 games at the NHL level with a bit of power play time. The one thing that we saw with Barron, though, he had a really, really poor training camp last year, and as the season went on, he started making a lot of mistakes in his own end. And Jesse, as strange as it is to say, I'm almost of the opinion that, if you can't move on from someone like Weidman, if you kind of have to keep him around the organization for whether it's chemistry reasons or no other team's willing to take him, or you just waive him maybe, but you say you do get rid of Edmundson, I actually think that the Habs might run with Harris over Xhekaj, and I know that's a crazy thing to say. Let us know in the comments whether you agree or disagree with that. I think Harris has shown maybe a bit more offensive and maybe even defensive upside at the NHL level, while Xhekaj does maybe have that bit of goal scoring, the bit of power play time, heavy shot, and physicality you need. I think that'll be one of the most difficult decisions going into next season, even if you can move on from Joel Edmundson. So let us know what your thoughts on the defensemen as we're going to move into the forwards. We're running out of time in this video. We could talk about this all day, and I want to see some discussion in the comments section, because this is such a difficult topic for us to talk about and for the Habs to talk about, I'm sure, in the room with Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes. But let's talk a bit about the forwards as we flash this back up. Jesse, 2 names that stand out: Jesse Ylonen and Raphael Harvey-Pinard. If you look at the depth of wingers on the Habs roster, it's pretty crazy. Maybe Gurianov doesn't get brought back on a QO. Maybe Sean Farrell plays in the AHL. Byron's done. Maybe Pitlick is gone. But there's still a lot of forwards, and you need to deal with it. And when you talk about someone like RHP and Jesse Ylonen, these 2 guys, they've shown a lot this year. Do you think these guys are bona fide NHLers come next season?
RHP is definitely a bona fide NHL player coming for next season, outscoring Kirby Dach, who in his own right had a great season as well. But I feel, again, RHP, when you're making these type of decisions, you're thinking of your overall cohesion. Mm-hmm. And RHP, along with Xhekaj, are the type of players, and Justin Barron, that fill these huge organizational needs that are very important, these niche sort of things that not everybody does. And while we know that our grinder with talent for many years has been Gallagher, we're seeing a changing of the guard, really. And who would be a better replacement than Raphael Harvey-Pinard? I think that he's already won his spot on this team. I think he's going to be a tremendous addition. And for me, having him on this team allows us to also make room for somebody like Jesse Ylonen. Because if we didn't have somebody like RHP on this team, I would definitely want to have Michael Pezzetta, because Habs fans, we've seen all year, Michael Pezzetta has just brought amazing energy and momentum to this team just by his hits, his engagement in the play. I think Michael Pezzetta is a great NHL player. I think he deserves to be in the National Hockey League. I just don't believe his long-term future will be with the Montreal Canadiens because RHP serves that energy type, momentum type of role that we need. That then allows for somebody like Jesse Ylonen, who does play a different wing than Pezzetta, but I feel that they'll be able to mix and match that just because we know with Kent Hughes, with Jeff Gordon, that we're really trying to build that offensive type of team. So I see Ylonen fitting that role a little bit better than Michael Pezzetta.
Yeah, I think you're pretty bang on with that. My only thing that I would say is I think we have two disagreements in a video. This is kind of crazy, right? Again, comment section is going to have to decide this. I feel like everyone's going to be against me, but if you look at this, I actually think that the four left wingers are going to be Caufield, Slafkovsky, Pezzetta, and Harvey Pinard. I think that Ylonen is just on the cusp but might not make it, but it also depends on what happens on the right wing, if Gurianov's brought back or not, if Gallagher's hurt, if Hoffman gets dealt, something like that. So I think there's a world where they both play. I think Pezzetta, especially in my opinion, if Xhekaj's not going to be on the team to start the season, if that ends up being true, as unfortunate as it is, because he's one of my, if not my favorite player on the Habs, but if you don't have him, you might need a guy like Pezzetta to fill in and fight and be that physical presence. So it's going to be very interesting. I think Sean Farrell to the AHL. So many guys are going to be coming up from the Q. Maybe someone like Kidney. Definitely someone like Logan Mailloux coming in from the OHL. Joshua Waugh's going to make a case. We didn't even mention these guys. But like we said, the Habs management are going to have a big problem this offseason trying to figure this out because we're having a tough time. You guys are having a tough time. And I can't imagine it'll be easy on them. But that'll do it for this news edition of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. We're almost at 5,000 subs. Help us reach it. We're not that far away. We know you guys can do it. We love your support, and we hope it continues. I'm Josh Gosse for my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.